Had to wait until the final episode of the season, but she finally showed up. House of the Dragon, episode 8 from season 2. Wasn't this 10 episodes last season? God damn it, Zaslav. Anyway, Abigail Thorne finally showed up. And you know what? This is a much better showcase for her than The Acolyte was. Not that she was bad in The Acolyte, she was a character who was literally part of a mass. Like, she had a couple lines, but there was not anything to distinguish her from the rest of those Force Witches, kind of by design. Other than, like, the two at the head of the thing, they were not made distinct. So this is a much better showcase for her. She really gets to shine in this, which is interesting. I'm going to get my discourse about her character out of the way. So here's a weird thing. My assumption, based on in-episode context, was that the character is actually transmasculine, which I thought seems fascinating, because to cast a transfeminine actress as a transmasculine character in a setting where HRT doesn't exist, that's actually really fascinating, because the default otherwise would have been, in most cases, to cast a cisgender woman as a transmasculine character who can't be on HRT. So, like, that's not to say that you couldn't have a transmasculine actor who is on HRT and just give him a good shave. But, like, when I thought that, I'm like, that's fascinating. I also don't think that's the case, because despite the fact that the character is introduced with those under her who seem to have a great deal of respect for the character, referred to the character as him. So that was part of my assumption, that, like, they're showing this character respect, and if they're saying him, then the character must want to be called him. I saw some stuff from some of the writers who are like, oh no, she's femme, but they just, like, can't deal with the idea that they're answering to a woman, so they have kind of decided to view her as him. What? Like, okay, I guess. That's way less interesting than what I thought was going on. I mean, like, the one thing that the writers and I seem to agree on is that the character was assigned female at birth. The writers and I seem to agree on that. What they say is going on, I find way less interesting than what I thought was going on before I read any of that. Regardless, Abigail Thorne does a real good job. Moving on from that. As for the rest of it, well, they've finally gotten around to at least somewhat justifying a number of characters who's like, why are you here? Characters like the ship captain, he's finally, like, been properly connected to characters that we actually give a dang about. And the one daughter who never claimed a dragon, after, like, okay, this is kind of what I mean when I've pointed out, like, the pacing on this season has been off. The idea that there was a really big dragon in the area that is unclaimed, and it's in the area that she already happens to be in, was introduced, like, 2 episodes ago? At the most recent, it was 2 episodes ago. And now we're finally having her face it, and then the season ends hard cut to black. Like, what? What is this pacing? And ultimately, with Daemon, all of that was to get him to a vision where he's going to drop his own machinations and just back Rhaenyra. Like, that's honestly a pretty interesting direction to push the character, given how selfishly he was behaving up to this point and how much he was focused on pushing up his own rise to power. The idea that he would set that aside because of this vision of the future that he has had is actually a really interesting thing to do with him. So I'm not denouncing the plot turn. How long we spent building to this, I'm like, I feel like you sunk way more time into this than was warranted. Like, that's just where I land on that. And I kind of feel like that about a decent chunk of this season overall. It is weirdly paced, and it's even weirder knowing that this season is 2 episodes shorter than the previous season. Because given that, you'd think that we'd be dealing with a case of a story being compacted, like 10 episodes worth of stuff crammed into 8 episodes. And then like stuff's too rushed. It doesn't feel competitive. It feels stretched, if I'm honest. This feels like, overall, having not finished the season, this feels like 6 episodes worth of stuff stretched out to 8. Yeah, that's kind of my summation of the season overall. It's not especially well paced. I suppose if I'm going to compare it to the last thing I finished reviewing, which was The Acolyte, which was also badly paced, at the very least, this one's pacing issues leave the characters room to grow and be properly characterized. The bad pacing that went on in The Acolyte was a different kind of bad pacing that just it just resulted in the thing going from bullet point to bullet point to bullet point without having proper characterizing moments. This at least does have them. Arguably too many in some cases, but at the very least, I suppose if I can't have a decently paced season of television, this is probably better on the pacing front than The Acolyte is, because The Acolyte just barreled through and was kind of a mess for it, despite having some really interesting ideas. I don't know why this has suddenly turned into a comparison with The Acolyte. I guess because I finished it recently. Also, Abigail Thorne's in both of them. But I guess just overall, Acolyte had more interesting ideas, but those ideas were hurt more by its pacing issues than this. I don't think this one has especially fascinating. It has like somebody just like, oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Nothing really grand or amazing, but also, its pacing issues don't harm its story as much as The Acolytes do. Anyway, getting off of that comparison, so we get a little bit more time with our new Dragon Riders. Not a ton. We don't really learn anything that we didn't already know. I guess we just learned that Ulf can't recognize that he should at least pretend to be better mannered than he is in front of certain people. So he's a dingbat. Great. Other than that, we don't really learn too much new about them. The thing with Alicent going up to talk to Rhaenyra, are we like in the world of like the last season of Game of Thrones where like everybody can just fast travel now? Is that what we're doing? Because like for how long it should take her to get to Dragonstone, I feel like it would be noticed that she's missing. It's not that I don't think she could make the trip. It's that I think there's no way nobody has noticed she's gone. That's sort of where I'm at. At least when Rhaenyra went to go see Alicent, like, she told people she was leaving. She didn't necessarily tell them where she was going, what she was doing. But she didn't tell them she was leaving. So, I don't know. That's a nitpicky thing. But as it was called out so much, especially in that last season, last two really, but that last season, especially of Game of Thrones, where like there was so much emphasis originally put on the idea of how long it took to get from one place to another. Now everyone just fast travels instantly. Like the characters with dragons, fair enough. Not everybody has them though. I'm just saying. And they briefly established Otto Hightower as being in prison. And I was like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about you. Okay. Oh, there was one other thing that was really weird to me. And I guarantee you it was a budget issue. It's like a plot point for a couple of things that go on here. That Aemond, after being turned away because, at the end of the previous episode, because there were 3 dragons and he couldn't take them on, just went and burned down some place called Sharp Point that I don't remember ever even getting established before. But like this whole thing of him burning down a village in his anger, you really needed to show that for a couple of reasons. The first is they haven't done a great job of selling the idea of Aemond as being mad. Like, Aemond is dangerous, for sure. They've sold that. But, like, there was this moment at the end of the previous season where it really seemed like he didn't want what happened with his dragon to happen there. And so the idea that he's now, like, this murderous madman. I think you needed to show us that. I think you need to show it that for me to actually buy it. You didn't sell it words alone don't sell that. Like I said, it's a plot point because it's part of why Rhaenyra is like, we can't use the dragons as just deterrents. We actually have to be prepared to go to war because look at what Aemon's doing just over there off screen. Sure was horrific and kind of important. It was real impressive too. You would have thought it was real something if you'd seen it. The seams are showing, and I don't think it's the show's fault. I think it's the studio's fault. I think it's the budgeting's fault. I think it's David Zaslav's friggin' fault. But yeah, just some odd things like that. But the character, here's the thing. Ultimately, in this episode, the character works pretty good. The newly introduced characters like Abigail Thorne's character, whose name I cannot remember and probably would mispronounce anyway, is really interesting, and I look forward to seeing more. The the new Dragon Riders work well enough. Having Aegon kind of flee with his spy master, that's an interesting thing, especially given that if he goes into hiding, he could pop up later and really throw a wrench into things for somebody, be it Aemond or anybody else. Hell, even if Rhaenyra gets on the throne, Aegon suddenly pops up out of nowhere after the fighting's done. That could throw a big wrench into things. Like, there's some interesting stuff going on here. And like I said, the direction Daemon went, I wouldn't have expected. And I think they sold that pretty well. So I don't want to act like they didn't sell anything that went on. But just like some of it, yeah. This was okay. This was solid enough that I expect I will be back for another season. I'm just not sure that I'm going to be like on the edge of my seat or super pumped. I think it's going to be a matter of I'll start seeing trailers in a year or so, a little less than that, and go, oh, right, that show. Yeah, I guess I'll check that out. That's kind of where I'm at with this thing at this point. House of the Dragon, Season 2 finale. What'd you think of this? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. If you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help me out, but don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Tarak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Gene Foray, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Trixie Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Dave Hall, White Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pal Barabajagal, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Oh look, you actually get a face this time and not just butts.